I know it can sometimes be confusing when you're writing an essay where exactly you need to put those references or those footnotes. But there's a really simple way of doing it and a couple simple rules that will get you through. When it comes time to put the citations into your actual essay, you can sometimes feel a little bit anxious because you're not 100% sure where you should put that footnote numeral. Should I put it right next to the bit of text that I'm citing, or should I put it at the end of the sentence, or somewhere in between? How do I know where it goes? And that's really the useful thing about using a standard style guide. There are very basic rules. In the case of Chicago, there's really only 2 or 3, and that tells you exactly where your citation needs to go. The important thing to remember is that this is not some kind of tyrannical rule that's telling you this is how you do it, this is the way you have to do it, or you will be punished. That's not the point of using a style guide. The point of using a style guide is to aid communication between you and your reader. Now, if you're using a written document rather than talking to somebody face to face, that means that you have to get all your ideas across in a static form. You're handing the document over, you can't explain more about it later. And that means your reader and you will have to have some of the same assumptions about how the text is put together. So if you put your citations where you think they naturally go, that's great, but what if your reader thinks about things in a slightly different way? Human beings tend to think similarly, but not identically. So whereas you think that that citation makes perfect sense going there, it might be really confusing to your reader. So if we use a standard style guide, even if it doesn't make 100% instinctual sense to either the writer or the reader, it's sort of a common language. So both of you know what it means and what information is actually being conveyed. So by following a style guide, any style guide, you're being really kind and empathetic to your reader. You're trying to make their life easier, and that's a good thing to do. And as for your own benefit, having a style guide means you don't have that anxiety. You know exactly where the footnote goes, and you can concentrate on actually writing the best essay that you can. So, as I said before, the Chicago style really only has 2 or 3 rules, and these can be applied to lots of different types of sentences. So we're going to go through this sample paragraph, and I'm going to show you exactly where the numeral goes in every case. So if we start with the first sentence, that's probably the most basic one you're going to encounter. It's a single clause, it has a subject and a verb, and a single punctuation mark at the end. This is a single sentence, full stop, or period. And for most sentences, it's going to be very simple to identify these different parts and say, this is how you insert your footnote. You simply go, and this is the basic rule in every sentence. You go to the end of the sentence after the last punctuation mark, after the full stop, after the question mark, and you insert your numeral there. Now I'm using Microsoft Word, so I have a shortcut key, which is Control, Alt, and F. And that creates my footnote that I'm going to put my citation in. And you can see that on the right-hand side of your screen. Now, if we go to the second sentence, we have, this one has a different punctuation mark, and it has an exclamation mark. But that doesn't matter. The same rule applies. You go to the end of the sentence, right after the last punctuation mark, and you insert your footnote. Control, Alt, F. Now here is a different time. Now, if you have a sentence that has a quotation within it, did you ask if I had put a footnote at the end of the sentence, question mark? Now, this is really tempting. You're saying, this is the quotation, this is the part that I'm citing, I'm going to put my footnote there. And I understand that. In some other styles, that's exactly where you would put your reference. But in Chicago, it's still considered best practice and really what people expect if you go to the end of that sentence, after the final punctuation mark, in this case a question mark, and Control Alt F, insert your footnote there. Now you can see, look, that's all really consistent. It's really easy to find the footnote. It's always in the same place. Now, the next one that kind of throws people off, however, is this sentence. What if, in the course of human events, we are required to quote two different sources in the same sentence? So this could be two different turns of phrase or two different quotations from the same source, or it might be two different quotations from different sources. And again, that urge to put footnotes after each quotation is going to be really strong because you want to indicate this is from this place and this is from another. But when you start doing that, you kind of ruin the consistency of where you're putting your footnotes, and you actually make things more confusing, not less, for your reader. So we still go to the end of the sentence where that question mark is, go to the right hand side of it, and Control-Alt-F, we put in that footnote. Now what's different is that when we go down to this footnote in our final essay, we put both citations in that single footnote. So citation A, and instead of a full stop like we would normally do for a footnote, we put a semicolon, and then we do our second citation B, and if there was a third one, we would do citation C. At the end of all of our different references, we put the full stop. And this is just how you would do a list of sentences in normal English grammar. So if you have one footnote, it's going to be a single sentence. If you have three footnotes, it's going to be separated with semicolons, with the last item in the list having a full stop or period. Now that'll make more sense when we start citing some of our other texts, books, and journal articles. But for now, just remember, you put all of your citations at the end of the sentence in a single footnote. And if you want to be helpful to your reader, make sure you put those citations in the same order that your quotations are. Don't put them in alphabetical order, just put them in the order of the actual references. If you want to be particularly helpful, you can also do something like this. For more on this, see citation A, and then follow that by for more on that, see citation B. And that gives a little bit of extra help, but it's not necessary. As long as you put it in the same order as it is in your text, that's all you really need to do. Now the next sentence is if you have two clauses. So a clause is basically something that could be a sentence on its own, and it's what we call an independent clause. It's something like, another thought has occurred to me. If I wanted, I could just put a full stop or a period there. That would be a whole sentence. But instead I've used this em dash to connect our two different sentences. So here is the little exception to the rule in Chicago. Because an independent clause is like a sentence, you can actually put the footnote there before the dash. So Control-Alt-F, that's where our footnote would go. Now I know that's a little confusing. Why isn't it after the dash? Well, because the dash is sort of a special punctuation mark used to separate clauses, it has its own special rule, but that is the only exception. In every other case, you do it after the final punctuation mark. Now, while Chicago style lets you do this, it lets you put this after the single clause, I still find it really messy, and you don't have to do that. In most cases, you can actually still just go to the end of your sentence and go to the final punctuation mark. And in this case, it's not the question mark, but the speech mark, the quotation mark, that is the final punctuation mark. And Control-Alt-F, you can just put your footnote there. Now, I find that a lot more attractive, and again, it makes more sense to me that that's where you look because it makes all of your footnotes in the same exact place. So, Chicago style lets you put it before that dash, but I would recommend that you always just be consistent and put it at the end of your sentences. The last one we're going to do is this sentence here. Now, it looks like just a normal sentence. It has a question mark at the end, so you could just put your footnote at the end here, and that would be fine. But if you notice, there's a little bit of a Latin phrase here, vox populi. Now, vox populi means the voice of the people, and that's a fairly common Latin phrase. But sometimes you'll use a specific scientific or industry term, sometimes you'll be using a foreign language term, and you want to give information about that specific word or that specific phrase. And that's really for definitions or translations. And in that case alone, you can put your footnote right there in the middle of your sentence. And this is where consistency is really helpful. Because that's the only place that you put a footnote in the middle of your sentence, it gives a little bit of secret information to your reader. What that footnote says is not that this half of the sentence is being cited, but just that word. So you can go down to your footnotes and you can type in voice of the people. And that's just giving a definition for that word to help your reader understand it better. So if we kind of sum up what we've learned here in this video, every single sentence, the basic rule is that you put your footnote numeral at the end of the sentence after the last punctuation mark. It doesn't matter if it's a full stop, an exclamation point, or a speech mark, always put it at the very end. The only two exceptions are if it's an independent clause, in which case you can put it before the dash, or if it is a definition of a term or a foreign word, in which case you can attach it to that specific term or word. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward, and now you should have lovely citations throughout all of your essays.